So just so you all know, tonight we're doing a Cannabis Business Awards yacht party.
Yeah!
On the seascape, it's going to be absolutely amazing. 5-star dining experience with top shelf liquor included. So we're going to be honoring 5 industry professionals for esteemed accolades and historic progress in this industry. So we would love to invite you all. You can register upstairs, or you can buy your tickets at usccexpo.com. So I'd like to thank the USCC Expo, and I guess we'll just get started, and Mike James can come on and jump on our panel. So, to my right, oh, here he is. All right, you made it. Everybody give a round of applause for Mike James.
Yeah!
Just goes to show that nothing's going to stop us from legalizing marijuana very, very soon, right? All right, so to my right, I have Jared Odrick, former Miami Dolphins first-round pick in 2010, 2-year Jacksonville Jaguar, and student and investor in the cannabis industry. Oh, he's a student at Cloverleaf University, just so you all know. We have Mike James. Mike James is an American football running back who is currently a free agent in the National Football League. James was selected in the 6th round of the 2013 NFL Draft by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and played college football in Miami. So, Hurricane Mike. My name is Villano. I'm the president and founder of Cloverleaf University, and I've been in the industry for a very long time. So, thank you for having me. To my left, we have Trace, say your last name? Jared. Trey, and he goes by Trey, so in case you guys want to know. He is a former Colorado State Ram running back. And you know that, I hate to say it, but you're probably my favorite because I was born in Denver, Colorado, so I'm a die-hard Bronco fan, and I went to see you. So that's a big deal. He's now in the industry working for Green Roads, which is one of the largest CBD companies in the United States. Thank you for being here. And then we have the infamous Boo Williams, founder of the Boo Berry Kush. Boo Williams is a former New Orleans Saint receiver and tight end, activist, and now business owner in the cannabis industry. Do you have any of that Boo Berry Kush for us, or?
I'll be here tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. So let's get started. You know, it's amazing to have this type of support in the cannabis industry, especially as we bring cannabis into the mainstream. We are looking to develop medicine for debilitating conditions in this industry. And I think what we don't really understand is, you know, in football and in sports, what our athletes have to endure to really entertain us on a daily basis. There's a lot of concussions. There's literally, you know, running after somebody at 60 miles an hour to tackle them onto the ground. And after that, over and over and over again, there is a lot of physical damage. They're not allowed to use CBD. As you know, the federal status of marijuana makes it illegal. And so, you know, as a football player, the last thing you want to do is be like, hey coach, I'm sick, I'm hurt, you know, because then they're going to bench you. You can't show weakness. You're made to be the tough guy, the guy that everybody wants to be, and the guy who never gets hurt. And so when we look at that, we say, what are we doing about their health care? We look at Michael Phelps, who is the best swimmer in the world and is a very known cannabis user, who's now got 23 gold medals to hang from his bong. What is making him one of the best athletes in America? And so I'm honored to have you guys up here today and discuss how we can move forward with CBD, cannabinol, recovery methods, and using recovery systems and medicines that that don't get you addicted to pharmaceutical drugs when you know no matter what you're going to have these type of injuries. So I'm going to start with a question, and then we'll go down the line, and all of you, if you have something to add, please do. So at what point in your career did you realize that cannabis was a benefit to your health and recovery moving forward?
For me, it was right after my tennis Olympics. So it was right after I broke my ankle in 2013, going into the 2014 season. I seen the benefits of cannabis, and it changed my life for the better. And I knew from then on that I wanted to use cannabis instead of anything else.
Right. Most definitely.
All right. For me, it started. I utilized cannabis all throughout my collegiate career. So I ended up going to JUCO initially. So junior college, they don't drug test. So I was able to medicate. And what I seen was it helped me with my anxiety. So before the games, I always get butterflies. Right, so it would help me. I caught it like a calm before a storm. So it would help me with my anxiety. And then just with all the other nicks and needs that we have as a running back. So I started out in 2012, really utilizing cannabis.
Well, me personally, I've been using cannabis since like 8th grade. I've been using this since 8th grade.
He's always been trouble.
Yeah, but everybody in my neighborhood used it, but we didn't know really what we was using it for. But it wasn't until I got injured in 2005 and 2006 to where I tore my Achilles. And when I tore my Achilles, they gave me two refills of 100 morphine pills. And just so happened, thank God I wasn't a pill guy, and all I did was use my cannabis, and that what really helped me get through. And that showed me from that point on really what I was using it for all of those years, but really didn't know.
And what about you, Jared?
My mic on? Can everybody hear me? Well, yeah, so I broke my leg in 2007. I snapped that. My foot was pointing the wrong direction. In Indiana when I played for Penn State, and then I broke it again my very first game with the Miami Dolphins. And then I came back to break my left foot 6 weeks later. And so through those injuries and trials, tribulations, you're given opiates and also ibuprofen, anti-inflammatories like Toradol, and you don't think twice about it because it's a part of the culture. And it's not just supported, it's encouraged to be able to use these drugs and to continue playing. And so it's there's like a sense of honor that comes with playing hurt, that coaches, that the organization, that other players encourage. And there's almost like an award or reward system, this silent reward system that ends up going on in between players and within a team and an organization. And you feel a benefit from that. You feel more of like an honorable warrior for doing so. But I'm sure they can all tell when you're done, there's no honor in it. They're just injuries. And so to be able to numb yourself out like that and continue playing is only going to further further complicate your issues and your injuries. And those are the things that you do in your own ignorance without being educated. But that's why I'm here educating myself. And that's why you're all here educating yourself, so you don't have to further complicate your own injuries, both personal or professional.
But what they don't tell you is, that part of the brain, other than the body, the part of the brain that we're damaging, first and foremost, is the prefrontal cortex. That controls rational thinking and impulse control. So when you see an athlete that, plays a violent sport, and you see outside of sport, guys are getting in different type of altercations and trouble, that's something that's not, that's not accident. That's something that, is done to you, and you're doing it to yourself, and you really don't even know it. And that's why you see like the Ray Rice incident and stuff like that, because the department tells you to wait, stop, and you think about what I'm doing, that's not working. So that's why we use cannabis, so we can be able to stop and process things and be like, you know what, this is the right decision, this is not, so let me go with the right decision. And that's what it really does, it helps for us. And I can say the whole time I was in the league, when I left practice, I sparked up in my car, going home. And that was my way to relax, that was my way to de-stress, because You know, you hitting people and fighting all day long. And when you get off of work, you don't want to be that same person. You know, and it's sad to say that, you know, the things that we do in professional sports, it's like light switches. But your life is not supposed to be like light switches.
What do you mean?
Turn it on and turn it off.
What do you mean by light switches?
Well, prime example, when we, before the game, we go out and we might have friends on the other team, and we'll go out, dap them up, hey, how you doing? We'll sit there and talk the whole time. But as soon as we go in that locker room, we flip the switch into I'm angry, I'm trying to kill you. And we go into war, and it's like that is something that's not a normal behavior. So if you continue these normal behaviors, they become a pattern of yourself.
Well, I think that's one thing that I'm really trying to figure out with CTE, and what a lot of people talk about and attribute towards CTE and the tau protein buildup inside one's brain, that they're attributing to the malfunction or the behaviors that you end up talking about with post-football. And you know, we just recently saw with one of my former teammates with Richie.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think what ends up happening is that I think it's really easy to point to the head trauma, but what you just spoke about was a social conditioning that happens within the game of football. And I think for a lot of people who aren't playing football, there's a lot of social factors that go into behavioral issues and behavioral malfunctioning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think medical marijuana, or even using it recreationally, can permeate those ideas socially and actually affect an individual, because I know it affected me. You know, a part of my social release from the game of football was alcohol for a while, because that's what I was taught where I was from. You know, I come from a family of alcoholics, and I know a lot of people deal with alcoholism, whether it's themselves or through loved ones. And I think when we end up speaking about traumatic hits that we either take or give out that end up affecting our brain function, I think we're also missing out on an opportunity to connect with a bunch of people on social issues and how we socially use these drugs. Because I think the way that I began to socially incorporate marijuana into my life is what actually allowed me to then take a step back and separate myself socially and be able to recognize what I was a part of.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people are yearning for that type of perspective. But I mean, that's another conversation about getting high, because I think it's necessary that we use THC as well.
Yeah, that's very true. And you know what I find so interesting too, Jared, about your, you know, your journey through this is that you're also, you know, very much, you know, an intellectual, a screenwriter. I know you're writing a play about a man who kind of had this similar experience, right? Or a screenplay.
Yeah. So I'm trying to write a screenplay. There's things that you try to do when you have time, extra change to do so. And so yeah, I'm writing a screenplay that kind of is, you know, about a player that, you know, we're insinuating has some type of issues with his brain, and you don't know whether it's from playing sports or whether it's a psychological, social issue that's going on with the individual. But I think, you know, that's one thing that's really overlooked, are the psychological and social issues that end up really affecting an individual who plays a sport like that. That's so polarizing, and that it's very easy to point towards the hits. And I think the hits may complicate these things, and the tau protein buildup that they see is also in Alzheimer's, or even in just in natural aging. I think it complicates a person trying to socially and psychologically break apart what his experience was in the NFL, because my experience was very separated from the rest of the public, and the same with you guys. It was very separated. You know, when I was when you're lifting weights, you're eating, you know, so just collegiately, I think we can all attest to that, where you're lifting weights separately from everybody else, you're socializing separately from everybody else, you're eating separately from everybody else, your living situations are separate from everybody else. I didn't have to have a job, I didn't have to pay a bill, I didn't have to do anything. And then when and I think that's the type of mindset that actually propels you throughout professional sports and throughout professional footballs, when you're not worried about anything other than football. And then to complicate that with potential brain injury and to try to figure that out once released from football.
Yes.
I think that's actually what's compounding our issues, and I think marijuana is something that can actually give us a sense of relief and away from trying to the expedience that we try to figure these things out because our lives and our careers are so polarized that I think there's a lot of pressure to figure it out.
But sometimes it might be a little bit too late, you know, because I laid on the railroad tracks in 2011 trying to commit suicide. And it was some homeless people that saved me. And at the time, I wasn't using cannabis. And I was living in Louisiana, and you just get what you get. And most of the time, it was that spice. And that's what people were using. And that's what, you know, I was using, but I couldn't really get to cannabis like I could. And it led me to the railroad tracks, man. And it wasn't until I got myself some help and realized what my brain was going through, what, you know, the difference of you know, trying to figure out who I was. And once I found out that, along with medicating helped me find who I was, because it makes you get a perspective and sit back and analyze things. And you know, once I got back on the right track of getting my mind rehabilitated along with medicating, you know, everything just took off.
For me, it was a little different. Being in Colorado, 2014, when cannabis was recreational, being able to come in and grow. So coming out of JUCO, you know, I was trying to figure out where I want to go to school. I medicated every day, so like, I don't want to come back to the east. I want to stay on the west coast. Colorado State calls, so I'm definitely going there because I know I can fit in.
Yeah.
Smoke, you know, that's the norm here, so I can fit in. So going there, you know, I got my first stipend check. Everybody's getting shoes, clothes. I don't get a setup. I don't get the grow tent. I get $2,000. I invested, right? That was an investment for me. But so I would grow my whole junior year. You know, I would go straight home from practice. Coach like, I don't want to study film. Oh, coach, I study at home. Got iPads. Got to get in the grow room. You know, because like you said, it's a therapy. So it grows, just growing, cultivating in general is a therapy, right? So it helped me find myself. So I spent days. For 4 years, so days, hours, just in the grow room. I was able to find myself and able to cope with, you know, what I was dealing with psychologically. So that's what helped me out a lot. So my senior year, I didn't play ball. So I got the chance, like y'all went professional. I walked away my senior year because I already seen what it was, right? It's a business, it's a cut business, right?
Yeah.
So I seen it early and I knew, you know, what's the chances? You know, it's a slim chance, right? I'm dealing with injuries and going through all of these things. So I'm gonna just take a step back. Let me figure it out. I went to my coach, hey coach, I wanna sit out this year. I just had knee surgery. My pops just got killed. Let me take this time off, let me figure it out. You know, the whole time I knew my plan was I wanted to launch into the industry. I wanted to let people know what I did. You know, I medicated every game. I'm not a bad person. I had a 3.4 GPA. I did get on the field. So I wanted to show individuals that you can be you can use cannabis and still be productive in society. So that's kind of the route I wanted to take and kind of hone in on, you know, not just professionals can suffer from CTE, but from the collegiate level, from the high school level. So that's why I come in and try to, you know, I go to different colleges, high schools, and we educate about these things. We talk to the team, to the trainers and parents, right? Because it's a thing that a lot of people don't want to talk about, right? It's a big money business. We don't want to hear about, CTE, you know, it's driving people away from the game. So, you know, they don't really, they hate seeing us coming. You know, they don't want to see us, you know, so definitely,
But they have to,
yeah.
because it's there. You know, it's there. It's not going nowhere anytime soon. You see, they're changing the rules of the game. They're changing the rules of the game to where guys they're ducking their head. You know, they're taking guys off the field. They're finding guys, but at the same time, you're playing a sport with guys that are our size and they're running 100 miles per hour, running into each other. You know, you're not going to stop impact hits. You know, you're not going to stop that. Things are going at 100 miles per hour, and what you're going to end up doing is having players hurt themselves trying to tackle, because it's not the normal way that you've been taught for generations, and now they're trying to change it up. So, you know, it's a thing of just trying to figure out, and I would tell my son, I would let my son play football. I want my son to play basketball or baseball. I don't want to play football, because I know the things that happen from football, and I think God put me here to play it so I can be able to tell my kids, like, listen, this is what you need to play, because you know, like I know certain sports are only brought in certain communities. Like we don't, you know, certain urban areas don't have baseball, they don't have soccer, all they have is football and basketball. So you're kind of funneled into certain sports in these schools. You know, these professional teams, they know this. They know the geographic area, they know where guys play football and basketball. And so, you know, when you got a funnel system, it's kind of hard to stop it, but we have to keep educating them so we give them options.
Yeah, and I think one thing that will benefit the idea of CTE in helping address the issue is broadening its definition. I think, the current definition, if anybody doesn't know, chronic traumatic encephalopathy is pointing to tau protein buildup in the brain, which is seen in other neurodegenerative diseases. And I think because what we end up doing when we speak about it, when we talk about funneling people into a sport or from an area or anything like that, we're talking about social issues. And there's a certain type of psychological conditioning that goes along with these social constraints or boxes or frameworks or structures. And what ends up happening, and what my definition, I'm actually creating a documentary about CTE where I interviewed the lead researcher Bob Stern at the concussion, that's Chris Nowinski, at the Boston University CTE Research Center, and then Chris Nowinski, who's the head of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, who actually teamed up with Boston University. So it's having two different companies doing the same thing. But I interviewed them, and I interviewed other sociologists, I interviewed people on my own to try to expand this definition of what it is. And by keeping it enclosed in a box, it almost doesn't allow other parts of society to end up affecting or helping the individuals that may be affected by it. And what I think is happening is we're pathologizing behaviors that are embedded in a culture, which is football. We're pathologizing behaviors that it takes to play the game of football, which is irritability, which is violence, which is reactiveness, which is anger, which is emotion. And those are low to middle evolutionary responses, right? That's being very reactive in emotion. And when you talk about where people are coming from, well, what do you have in those areas? That's violence, you have reactiveness, and you have emotion, right? The third step in being able to react to somebody being angry or violent at you, like the game of football, is to think. And those things I don't think are developed a lot of times in those socioeconomic homes. One home that I came from, I was a very angry young kid, and I funneled that, and I was also taught to funnel that into the game of football. So football almost serves as a social cushion for those behaviors, that it facilitates those behaviors and they use them. With the military, it's a bit more reform that goes on, because you have to fit in this regimented box, and you're not paid thousands or potentially millions of dollars to do so. And so there's a bit more of a reform that goes on with armed forces, but with football, it's a home for these behaviors, and then they are monetized, right? So I think a lot of times we're pathologizing the behaviors that were then once monetizable. So what's happening now is when I speak to these lead researchers in Boston, both Boston University and the Concussion Legacy Foundation are both located like a mile apart from one another. What the first thing they end up talking about is, well, in 4 to 5 years, in 4 to 5 years, in 4 to 5 years, we'll have a prescription drug. We'll have a prescription drug. We'll have a prescription drug. And so, as much as we want to look at the biochemical issues inside the brain, we're still speaking socially and economically about making a drug, a pill, that will then affect brains. And what happens when you affect the brains of these, call it what it is, these large black demigods that are, you put us in a Nike suit, right, you'll buy that. Well, if we start taking, pills that over 10 million Americans, young Americans, play a sport, and, you can start mitigating your risks now by taking this pill. And if we normalize it, well, then why wouldn't everybody else fall in line? Why wouldn't you buy the Nike just like you buy the pill? And so what I think is happening is pathologizing of behaviors that is normalized because it is monetized. And that's a whole other discussion in terms of the disease question in society.
We need the whole day. Because there are a lot of issues, and this behavior is learned, and it's encouraged, and it's a big issue because, like I said, if I had a child, I don't think I would want him to play football either until we did. I wouldn't want him to take a pill so he would be okay. So we will take questions at the end. But so let's talk about, what's the worst sports-related injury that you guys had, and how was it treated?
Well, for me, concussion, which was I had a herniated disc in my neck also, and also.
That's you.
And also, 2013, I treated that with opiates the first time, and then I started using cannabis. And I don't know if anybody knows much about the NFL concussion protocol, but when you go into the concussion protocol, you continue to have symptoms. It's 23 hours a day, dark rooms, do the same thing. And then you go take a 30-second concussion test, and then you're back out. If these things persist, the only thing they have is antidepressants for chronic headaches. Or you can opt out of medical behavioral therapy, cognitive therapy, vestibular therapy. That's what I did. And I decided to fill out a TUE, therapy use exemption, to allow, trying to get the NFL to allow me to use cannabis. So that's the process where a lot of guys use Adderall and other prescriptions that they're prescribed by a doctor to let the league allow, even though it's against the league policy and on the banned substances.
Because I know you, before the game, you get that shot in your butt before the
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
And people don't realize what that Toradol shot do to you. You
Yeah.
get that shot in your butt before the game, you go into a whole nother zip code and you're ready to demolish anything in front of you. And they're expecting that to last the whole game. And now when the game's over, now you're crashing.
Yeah.
Now you're crashing, now you're irritable. Now guess what? These players, not everyone is single. All these guys got families, they got kids, they got wives. So when they go home, guess who's getting it? People at home is getting it. So therefore now you have these players that you're basically creating and asking them to stop their animalism when they go home. It's hard to do that. It's hard to do that. I know one thing for me is I just kept in my head is I do not want my mom and grandma to see my name at the bottom of that ESPN screen. and that's what I kept saying in my head. I do not want my mom and grandma to see my name at the bottom of that screen because it's really embarrassing. Not embarrassing on you, but embarrassing on your family.
Right. I know and back to what we was talking about, the total shot. Story of my life, we went down to Boston College my junior year, and it was the first half. I ended up spraining my LCL, right? So I'm on the sideline and I'm telling the trainer, like, I can't even play. I need to play. I should run back. And he's like, well, we got something for you.
Yeah.
So we go in halftime. Doc's like, hey man, if you take this, you get back on the field.
Yeah.
I gotta get on the field. I gotta play this. Junior year, I'm trying to get stats. Hey, let's go, Doc. I don't know what it was. I didn't ask him. Then shot with the Toro shot. I went out there and ran for 100 yards, touchdown. Right? That's a performance enhancement. Right? People don't understand that. If I were to see cannabis, CBD, I wouldn't have been able to go back out there and play. Yeah, the pain would have been through the lesson, but I wouldn't have been able to go out there and play a full game. On the strength.
And make it worse.
Exactly.
And you're making it worse. And that's the main thing, like I said, that we go through is when you get injured. I know I tore my Achilles, I tore my knee, and it's the mental part of trying to get back out on the field.
Right.
Because little Jimmy that's behind you is like a horse in the stable waiting to take your spot. He's coming. I mean, and they let it know that he's coming. I mean, it was a point in time where I had a pulled hamstring, and it was like, you put a sleeve on it, take a shot, and you're like, Coach, I don't think I can go. And you're like, well, the guy behind you gonna have to go, and they're implanting this in your head, so you're like, hold on. If this guy takes my spot, then that messes up my money. I'll take care of my family, I take care of a lot of people. So therefore, if that happens, then I'm out of a job. So you continue to play on these injuries even when you're getting killed out there.
I think, I started developing this idea of a first round perspective. I was fortunate enough to be drafted in the first round in the NFL to the Miami Dolphins in 2010. And I think one thing that I recognized that it afforded me is the ability to speak my mind more than other players. There's, and that's not necessarily because of my own personal ability, it's because of my economic standing within the team, right? So they're attached to me for 5 years, so I'm not going anywhere, right? And so then also their own egos, especially the general manager, right? Well, they're not going to, release, trade, or cut their first round pick because they have to stand behind their own knowledge that we used our first pick to pick him. So it's like, oh, well, then I've got you cornered, so I can say whatever the hell I want, and I can still make my guaranteed money. So I can act whatever way I want, and so I can speak openly and truthfully. And I think that's one of the things that ended up being an eventual roadblock in my career, was how freely I spoke. And I think I call it a first round perspective because you're given more space to think and speak. And a lot of times in the locker room, when I would say things to coaches or general managers, damn, Jay, you crazy, man.
Yep.
What are you talking about? Why are you talking like that? I'm like, well, what are they gonna do?
Yeah.
If they're gonna cut me, they still have to pay me the guaranteed money that they signed in the contract. And plus, they look like idiots if they pick me and then let me go. And then make me, double dip. What they call in the league is double dipping.
Double dip.
So if you have guaranteed money from a prior team and then you're going and get guaranteed money elsewhere, it's double dipping. And to double dip in the NFL, and and I'm not sure how everybody feels about this, but it's like, you get called a locker room lawyer, or what essentially is a smart nigga. And that's what ends up happening. When you act like a smart nigga, you get called a locker room lawyer like you're making money, you're about your economics, and it's not looked well upon by by other players, which is surprising, but it's by other players, it's by coaches, and it's especially by management. And so when you represent yourself like that, or at least the way that I thought that I did, I was able to develop a perspective that said, no, fuck off. I'm not going to go back on the field because you want me to. Like my rookie year, the first game I fractured my leg in Buffalo. And I'll take you exactly through what happened is that I get hit, we blitzed our safety, Jeremiah Bell, and I had to stunt inside. I was playing a 4-eye position, which means head up on the tackle, so I go inside. Well, he gets knocked off of his blitz and his helmet comes and hits my leg. Yeah. And so when that happens, it hurts, but a lot of times when you get impacts on any part of your body, you kind of just rub it out, right? It's like, all right, this will turn into a bruise later, but that's about it. And I tried to play another 2-3 plays, and the pain got worse and worse. So I come off the field, and I'm like, there's something wrong with my leg. I don't know the pain's not going away. So we go back into the locker room where they have an X-ray machine at the stadium. We X-ray my leg. They don't see anything. So they give me a shot. They give me 2 pills. So I think it was more Toradol than I've already taken, and then Vicodin. And so then I go back out onto the field, and they wrap it up, they try to support it with whatever they can, and I'm on the sideline trying to get off of my stance. Now mind you, I'm the team's first round pick in the very first game, right? I'm the shiny new toy, right? I'm the shiny new toy that also has to reinforce the pick of the general manager, right? So there was a lot of pressure on an individual who has to, be this thing that you're expected to be. And so I'm trying to fire out of my position, I'm trying to feel good, and even with all the drugs, it still hurt. And they were like, well, there's nothing wrong with your leg. And so the trainer isn't there for you, they're there for the team. And I think that's generally understood, but to be on the sideline when somebody is, the only thing that they're not doing is cracking a whip when they're trying to get you back onto the field, is, to then later realize when you fly back to Miami and get x-rays from a real x-ray and MRI machine that you have a fractured leg, right? And that I was trying to play on a fractured leg, and they were trying to tell me that there was nothing wrong with it. So what ends up happening in between that fracture, and then the next time I try to come back and play 6 weeks later, I'm at the Miami Dolphins facility trying to rehabilitate myself as fast as I can to get back onto the field. I get a note in my locker from the general manager that says, hey, we picked you in the first round for a reason. We need you on the field. So I broke my leg the same day that Reggie Bush broke his leg. Reggie Bush came back 10 weeks later. I came back 6 weeks later. Mind you, I was 315 pounds at the time. So having that much weight on top of the leg is not going to make sense when somebody who's 200 pounds is going to come back 10 weeks later. So we're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it was week 6 or week 7. And it's like, oh, I'm from Pennsylvania, I have to play the Steelers. Everybody at home's going to be watching. Everybody at home's going to be watching. So what do? I see the note in my locker from the general manager, and I see the drugs right here that I can take. Well, I take those drugs, and I go out there and I practice. And I feel like shit, I look like shit, but everybody says, yeah, you look great, babe. You look great. But you look great. But you know. And so then I went to go plant on my right leg, and and I knew that I shouldn't because it was still broken. So I crossed over and I broke my left foot. And so my rookie year, I had a broken foot and a broken leg, and it was crazy to see that the general manager didn't speak to me for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's
and I'm your first round pick. It's supposed to be, and it was really weird, how it was so blatant that how your worth and your value to not only an organization but to individuals and to people plummet once you don't provide them exactly what they expect of you.
It's almost like a human rights violation.
Yeah, he tell you, you know, and with those general managers, you know, they love you. They love you, trust me, they love you like a mug until you cannot go anymore, or until they're trying to trade you. I mean, that's just the way the game goes.
And the game doesn't offer lifetime health insurance, right? Once you're
Well,
retired.
I know now there's a new CBA. I know
When you're vested, if you're vested, you have 5 years.
5 years.
After you retire, then you can start working the HRA.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the limit.
So basically what he's saying, you got 5 years. After that 5 years, after you got to leave, you don't have insurance no more. You got to go dip into your HRA. So we don't have long lifetime insurance. And they can vouch for it. It's like when you try to get up in the morning, the worst thing you can do is have to pee at 2 o'clock in the morning. Because trying to get that body movement and going at 2 o'clock in the morning is hell.
I could barely go pee into a body.
But that's what I'm saying. How does your body feel when you try to get up in the middle of the night? It's like,
That's why you keep that water bottle.
Yeah, you guys are still young. When do you get in your 60s?
hey, but it feels like it already because you know it's just not the impact from the games. It's the impact from practice. You're practicing all the time. You're taking those small little baby hits all the time. You know, that is what damages you. And after I went through, you know, what I went through in 2011, I turned around and opened up an athletes treatment center in California for athletes with neurocognitive issues called the Crosby Sports Treatment Center. And you know, and what we found out is a lot of athletes, you know, when these guys, they come in, they're huge, like 6'5", 6'6", but they're like little babies in a cocoon, and they don't want to talk to anybody, and it's not the norm. You're like, hold on, you was in a locker room, camaraderie with guys, and now you're in this shell, don't want to go out, don't want to talk to anybody, don't want to see anybody, and that's a problem. And it's just showing guys, you know, having guys have different options, showing guys really what is beneficial to your body, because everybody's body is different. Everybody's body is different, and that's why we have this medicine that can cater to each individual person.
And I think honestly, as Americans, it's up to us to change policy, and it's up to us to take care of our athletes and make sure that we fight for this and fight for even medicine. When we have people with AIDS, people with cancer, you know, who have regular jobs that they can't even consume cannabis because they get drug tested. You know, my father just had surgery for prostate cancer, but he's a truck driver, so he can't use cannabis. You know, or he'll lose his job. So, I mean, it's very important that we start to look at healthcare and start to take it more serious, because the only change that's going to happen is within us. So, it's a big deal. Let's talk a little bit about these concussions. We talk about CTE. I mean, I fell surfing in the pool. I knew something was going to go down.
Prime example, can you surf? Or was you out there just doing it? Can you surf?
You know, I suck.
Okay.
I'm all right. You know what I mean? But it's so funny because, you know, I fell and I hit my head really hard on those cliffs, you know, carrying my surfboard and all my bags down. And I felt like I wasn't right for a couple of days. And that's probably the first time I ever hit my head. So, I mean, getting multiple concussions, like how, do you even know how many concussions you guys have had?
Well, at our treatment facility, I can't say the guy's name, but we had a guy that played for 15 years, and he had 97 documented concussions.
Wow.
97. And
He had
that's
seven
so
documented. This guy,
Can you even say his name?
no, it's just, he can't even say it. I tell you what, we had to take him to get these shots in his head every other day because of his brain was, you know, he was really damaged. And I can tell you a short story is, you know, when I first opened up the treatment center, I had a few guys in mind that I wanted to come to my treatment center because I knew when I played, they already had a little issues. So when I called him out of the blue, just to, you know, call him, and I texted him, I said, hey man, this is Blue, I have an athlete treatment center, helping athletes with neurocognitive issues, let me know if you need any help. He texted me back and said, God must be talking to you. So I'm like, okay. I called him. So I called him and he's like, God must be talking to you right now. I'm sitting in my lap with a 45. I'm sitting in my house right now with a 45 in my lap about to blow my brains out. And I'm like, where are you? He was like, I'm in Covington, Georgia. So I get on the flight, I get to Georgia. He's still on his couch. He had a safe with a note in it with a suicide note. And he was going to kill himself. So we got him to come to our place in California. He was there for 4.5 months. And now we helped him get his life in order. We helped him get all of his benefits because he didn't have any benefits. None. And what really sent him over the edge is, once the game is going, certain people leave out of your life. And they'll vouch to that. You got friends and family, and they're all there when the lights are flickering. As soon as those lights cut off, everybody's scattered like roaches. So you're like, okay, who am I? Who loves me? You don't know this. And this is all the stuff that he was dealing with. He came home and his ex-wife had took everything out of the house and left. So she left him with nothing in the house, and that just sent him over the edge. And it just takes something small to send you over that edge, especially when you already have brain damage. So he came to our place, got help, got his benefits, and now he's living a more comfortable life, but now he knows exactly what he's going through and how to get treated.
For me, I honestly don't know. I've never been documented with a concussion. I would always self-diagnose. So if I got named and got up, I'm kind of like, okay. I would ask myself my name, my birthday, social security number. If I can answer all of that, I'm staying in the game. So I've never, went off the field. My main coach, I need to get checked out for a concussion because there was never something where I wasn't able to get back up. So I always just kept my.
That old saying, can't make a club in the tub. And they'll tell you that saying right there will have you going out there literally trying to kill yourself, trying to play. Because they said all to the locker room.
Explain to them what can't be the club in the tub means. It's something Jonah wants to say, but explain to them what that means.
Well, what it means is, you have this thing in the locker room where you can't make a club in the tub, and what it is if you're hurt all the time, and you're constantly in the training room, you're constantly in the ice tub, you're constantly getting something done to you, and it doesn't allow you to play, then you can't make the team. You can't show the coaches and everybody what you're made of. So the more that you're hurt, is the more that somebody else is playing in front of you, and therefore you don't have a spot. So you see a lot of guys, I know a lot of you probably know new guys that was good athletes, and man, what happened to this guy? I could have sworn he was good, but when a guy stays hurt, you can't be on the team. They got to give that slot to somebody else.
It's almost like being in the military, and really shame on America, shame on the NFL, and shame on these leaders for not caring about people and caring more about field and stadiums. Really. So you're going to have to listen to us because the whole world is watching. And the truth is that, we look at, like I said, even human rights. I mean, this is, how can we not offer, even counseling, much less, therapy or things like that for people who've lived like that, with that type of rage or been encouraged to go through that. I think really the NFL, it's their responsibility to not only have, real treatments available to you guys, but to provide that for the rest of your lives after you retire and care about that. This guy's injured. What we care about is his life as a human being, because here we have 22 veterans a day killing themselves because of the trauma they go through, fighting for this country so we live a free life. But we don't think about them as we go about our every single day. But yet how many of them have guns to their heads? And it's very similar in football. Once you're done fighting for your country, you're kind of out. You don't have all that support. And it's the same thing with football, and it's absolutely unacceptable.
But this is what they don't tell you is, the thing is, the only sports that test for cannabis, that can they'll fine you and suspend you is NBA and NFL. Not Major League Baseball, not soccer, not hockey. All these other leagues, they can use cannabis. But only NBA and NFL. You test and take your money and suspend you.
And to say, what you said earlier about, the comment about them telling you that you're smart, and then using the other word.
Smart nigga.
Yeah.
That is racist. So what does that mean? Does that mean that because, I don't care what anybody says, we have an equality issue, in the United States of America? And is that mean because minorities are playing football that it doesn't matter, that you can just go ahead and
Oh
pull
yeah,
it
it's out there.
And
Trust
that's
me, you can
ridiculous.
tell.
I don't think it's about equality. I think it's about, well, I
Money?
just think I think it's, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think it's more about, when that ends up happening, it's just a societal role that people want to fulfill. It's the same thing, I just had an interaction in the back of the room, right? Where it's, you played for who? And then, then there's names that go off, and then there's an experience that people want to attach to the idol that you serve. So the symbol that I serve to other people and the representation of sports, it's almost that I have to fulfill that idea for people in order to keep their idea of what a sports player is, what a football player is, and to continue doing so. What I really enjoyed throughout my career was throwing curveballs back at people. It's like, oh, you're sitting in first class in this plane, you must play sports. No, I'm actually a doctor.
I say the same thing. I say the same
But
thing.
I think when we use the word smartly ill, or we use the word locker room lawyer, it happens in school too, and it happens in certain types of environments where if you were to raise your hand or have more to say and want to speak and answer questions, it's not seen as weakness, but it's a social faux pas that ends up happening around certain demographics, and especially men, and I think especially ethnic men, where you're raising your hand to answer a question. It's the same thing that happens inside of a locker room, because there's, unfortunately, socially, there's a lot of large boys in an NFL locker room, and when you start to express yourself and essentially stand up for yourself within a locker room and within an organization, then it's seen as detrimental to your role that you play on the team and to the rest of society. So when I end up speaking about, oh, why'd you leave the Miami Dolphins? Well, I left because of an economic choice, that I can go make a whole lot more money with another team and continue my pursuits that you would like me to pursue, like Pro Bowl and Super Bowl, but I want to live on the beach. I want to live in a tax-free state, and I want to make as much money as I can before my body runs out on me. So those reasons aren't always the most pleasurable for the spectator, because they want to be able to believe that there is a higher meaning and purpose to you playing the game.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good, and you can be a part of that, you can fulfill that. But what I tell people all the time, guys that are continuing to play the game or that will, or trying to play professionally, is that you must have your own set of morals and system aside from what the game and the rest of society purports. Because if you only have goals of being a All-Pro, Pro Bowl, or Super Bowl player, or Super Bowl winner, you don't have a really high rate or high chance of success at that. Those are all very, very hard things to attain, let alone getting to the NFL. And so, if you don't have morals or goals separate from the person that you're supposed to be, well, then you're going to feel a great loss and sense of grief, especially when you're done with the game, because all of those things are now vanished and gone. So what I tell people all the time is that you need to build separate morals and goals while being the role or playing the role that everybody else would like you to. So it's, well, I want to live on the beach, so I have the choice between playing for Oakland or playing for Jacksonville for my free agent deal. It's like, all right, well, Jacksonville fulfills that. I want to live in a tax-free state. California is certainly not tax-free. And so I'm like, okay, well then that's another decision that I can make. And then, you have to have your own set of moral standards that you abide by, because if not, then when the game ends, then all of your morals are gone. And I think that's why you see a lot of guys running back to the game once the game is over, trying to be coaches, trying to be
slaves to the game.
and you essentially are. But and I think what we end up talking about is social and psychological issues. And I think when we begin speaking about those things, I think we arm ourselves to be able to combat someone or something like the NFL that doesn't provide as much support, care, or security that they should provide current and former players. So I think when you end up doing that, you end up making yourself a hero as opposed to a victim. And I think when you invest in heroism, I think more gets done and people end up respecting you more, and I think the other side hears you a little bit more. And so I think that's one huge thing that that I'm witnessing is as I arm myself, meaning educate myself, and come to things like this and connect with people like yourselves, that's where change ensues, right? When you arm yourself instead of saying, well, you know, I'm a victim, all this bad stuff happened to me, something needs to change. It's like, no, there's psychological issues, there's social issues, there's biochemical issues, and all of that can be incorporated underneath the idea of marijuana.
Thank you, applause.
Social issues. I mean, from the standpoint of talking about collegiate athletes, right? When you come out of the league, you got a check. When you're in the league, you're getting a check, right? College, you're gonna get paid, right? So you gotta think about there's thousands of colleges out there. There's athletes that graduate every year and wanna go to the league, right? So that's the social issues you're talking about. Collegiate athletes deal with that same issue. So I know a lot of my boys who played at the University of Miami, Down guy, for example, played EN at the University of Miami, got caught up in, got caught up in some things and had to go to switch schools, but when he graduated, he didn't know where to go. It was just all about football. That's all he taught, right? So my senior year, I was able to get out. I was able to go to the meetings with all my classmates, do the group projects, right? When I played ball, I didn't do group projects. I made a phone call. Hey, could y'all do that part for me? Yeah, we got you, Trace. I played ball, so they gonna do it for me. So you're not able to get those experiences. You don't experience college. You don't make connections that you need when you graduate, right? So those guys are really lost, right? So that's why you see a lot of guys that go back to the hood. Hey, why you in the hood? You got a degree. You don't know how to use it. You have no connection. It's all about who you know, right? Everybody up there got a paper. But like I tell people, if you didn't go to Ivy League and MIT, people don't understand what I'm saying, right? It's all about who you know. So that's sociological issue.
Unless you went to the U.
Yeah, probably.
Or
Yeah, so that's why I like to stand in front of trying to shine a light on that whole realm, collegiate athletes, because it's a huge issue. You got a lot of guys, you know, that's lost right now.
I got some teammates that are lost, ex-teammates that are lost in the University of Arkansas, and they're really lost. And, you know, they're trying to find different things, different programs to do, and it's like the same thing that you said, when guys are focused on nothing but ball, when they're done, they're lost. And then that's why I got a documentary that I'm working on called Slave to the Game. And all of that wraps up into it, because once guys get out of school, they're finished ball, it's like, well, what do I do now? And what they do is they revert back to what they know most. And that's the training or coaching or some type of organization. But we're trying to get guys to break away from that and get more educated and get guys to, really thinking while they're playing, which they don't want you to do. They don't want you to think while you're playing. That's the wrong thing to do. So we want guys to get more educated, especially in this industry, because it's a no-brainer. I mean, if I'm playing, if I would have known then what I know now when I was playing, I've been heavily invested in the cannabis industry and got products and growing facilities and doing all of these different things. And that's why, I try to go back and talk to some of these guys that are still playing, like, listen, this should be a no-brainer for you. If you're going to sit here and use cannabis 24/7 and you're going to buy it, why don't you get inside the industry and make it work for yourself and create your own medicine, and then you can create your own wealth. Because I tell people like this, I have way more fun doing this than out playing football.
I think that our panel is up, right? Our time is up. Okay, so I want to thank all of you for being up here. And thank you to the United States Cannabis Conference for having all of us. And
She had a bunch of questions. Can we take one more question?
I guess we can take a question. I mean, they're asking me to wrap up.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. My name is Dr. Lauren Bisk, and I am a doctor, and this is an area I'm particularly interested in. And I guess I just wanted to make a couple comments about what I heard, and particularly from you, Jared. One is about the importance, from my point of view, of integrating cannabis into a comprehensive treatment program. So I can tell you, as a licensed clinical psychologist who works a lot in trauma, that a lot of what we're doing here is conflating psychosocial issues with disease states. Disease states have to do with pathological organ systems. So when we talk about CTE, we're talking about a pathological organ system.
Pathological what?
Organ system. There's pathology in the brain. When we talk about some of the psychosocial manifestations that come out of the culture of playing football and being acculturated into a certain value system, that's a psychosocial issue.
Yes.
And just from a treatment point of view, from a medical point of view, I think it's important not to conflate the two. Cannabis can treat certain physiological and biochemical states. The problems of living don't go away with cannabis. The problems of living need to be addressed in a comprehensive treatment plan.
Yeah, a lot of what I talk about, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because a lot of what I talk about in my potential documentary and a lot of the writings that I do, is it's expanding the idea of what CTE is, because what we're doing is pointing to tau protein in the brain, and then we're pointing to behaviors. And in the medical literature, they cannot actually connect the tau protein to the behaviors.
That's because we can't, I mean, we're actually working on biomarkers to change that. There is work being done now in biomarkers that'll help us to identify CTE without requiring a brain biopsy.
Yeah.
And actually, cannabis is involved in that, in certain mechanisms of action. But that's very difficult to do because the presence of the calcification in the brain is something that's hard to identify without basically a biopsy.
Well, yeah, it's,
And we're not going to biopsy human beings, so
Yeah,
we
we can-
go by behavioral manifestations.
What I think is really interesting is that we can only see CTE and diagnose CTE post-mortem. And a lot of the times when we diagnose it to an individual, it's based off of a report from a next of kin. And so it's not something that is a living diagnosis, right? This is a next of kin. And what ends up happening when a next of kin gets to tell a story, right, about who this person was, they then are absolved from all of their wrongdoings as an individual simply because, oh, they had CTE.
And that's why we're now looking at protein markers, biomarkers, that will tell you from a blood test about certain proteins. But I just want to say that that's not unique to CTE.
No,
Okay,
no
I
question,
was a consultant to the Hebrew Home for the Aged for years. And one of the things that was my job to do is determine when somebody's suffering from dementia versus delirium. So before I would even assess a senior adult, I would require the nursing staff to watch them drink 8 glasses of water a day. Why? Because more often than not, we diagnose people as demented when really what they have is delirium, which is they're dehydrated and on a shitload of medication. So this isn't just specific to CTE, it has to do with the limitations of medicine, both in terms of what we can do and what we know, but also in terms of, frankly, the ridiculous system in which we practice these days.
No question, and I think you raise a great point in that there's a lot of genetic markers that predispose us to certain malfunctions in an environment. And if I could, real quick, talk about how, just real quick, you know, speak to people and come to understand what I've been writing about, because if we're all here actually wanting to help people, then we can't solve complex issues with simple answers.
Thank you.
That's right.
You can't do it, and it's not possible.
And it's not
we're
just
being
like
indoctrinated
this.
into believing that there is a monotherapy for everything and that there's a pill to solve all of our issues when they're complex. And if you're not willing to be complex about these things, they'll never get solved.
Thank
So
you.
the thing is that we're predisposed. It's very much like sunburn or sun damage, right? Sun damage is one of the things that you can see that happens. But there may be a dark woman from Somalia and a light woman from Scotland that is obviously more susceptible to getting sun damage when in the sun for prolonged periods of time. It's the same thing with CTE in the brain, where if you are predisposed to building more tau protein in the brain because you are more susceptible to building tau protein from repetitive brain trauma, then you will most likely build more of that. And so it's the same thing where it's So if I were to, but we can't see CTE in the brain. We can't, I mean, CTE, and I think we're doing it too many favors by calling it CTE instead of just tau protein. Because what you end up doing by calling it CTE, you're legitimizing the connection between the tau protein in the brain and the behaviors without looking at it and making it a multivariate analysis of psychological, social, and biochemical. And so when you make that connection for the people that are reporting the ideas of what CTE is, you're further enhancing their agenda to create a pill that will then attempt.
You see, what you're doing, and I
We
get
actually
it.
do have to wrap this up.
Say time is money. Let it up.
Yeah, I know.
Sometimes medicate.
No,